So this week we're going to be looking at chapter 3 in Bloom's book, and he delves a little bit into American revivalism and kind of what he considers the birth of the American religion comes out of the revival movement of the Second Great Awakening, the Cane Ridge events, the Burned Over District, the work of various revivalist speakers. We're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at, because some of this happens in the South with slavery still going on, and the kind of the failure to affect slavery in the South, though some of the revivalists are very strongly abolitionist. We'll see that. We're going to read some excerpts from Frederick Douglass's biography, because I think it's important to understand how he saw these revivalist movements. I'm sharing some kind of history videos, but faith history videos. Kind of a revivalist person doing these short history videos on various revival movements in the U.S. Because in part Bloom is kind of taking this semi-critical stance against the revivalist movement. It's like he can't see, he doesn't really delve much into any positive aspects of it. So I'm giving you kind of some videos from others from a perspective that's very much kind of an evangelical revivalist movement perspective. So I want you to see both those perspectives on this. Realize that even in the church writ large, kind of the larger Christian church community in the U.S., there have always been people that thought these awakening movements were too emotion-centered. Not that emotions were necessarily bad, but that there wasn't much fruit besides emotion, has been the claim of some. Others, I mean, there's a spectrum, a wide spectrum of views, but on the extreme other side is like this: these are the greatest things. These are truly great awakenings, and we need them to happen again. There could be views all in between there, but Bloom is very much kind of takes a critical view of them. So these videos give you a more positive view. I think Frederick Douglass gives you some interesting insight from within the time, from someone who experienced kind of maybe the failures of it. But then you can also see a sermon from a major revivalist speaker against slavery. So to some degree, certain aspects of this revival movement helped towards abolition. So it's not as unfruitful in that sense as Bloom might seem to make it appear. Also, we'll look at in this context, Bloom talks about how there really isn't much room for Calvinism in the American religion. I present a very brief article from 2014 in, I think it's the New York Times, that you can read about kind of a postmodern movement towards a more Calvinist theology within those evangelical churches that have that more revivalist tendency. That article's from 2014, and it asks, is this a fad, or is this something that's going to last 10 or 20 years? I would say in my experience, I don't think it's just a fad. It may not be as strong of a stream within the modern current evangelical church as it was in the writing in this 2014. But I think there is still a draw towards certain expressions of Calvinist doctrine within kind of a millennial church circle, what there is left of a millennial church circle. So how does this Calvinist movement relate to the revivalist movement? Is American Christianity really opposed to a Calvinism? Is a Calvinist Christianity really opposed to this sort of revivalist kind of emotional movement? you know, if I can find it for the discussion board, I had at one point found a video of someone who's very kind of hyper charismatic, very emotional, spiritual, kind of spiritual high, emotional high. You know, if you worship God, you're just going to be happy, happy, happy. Almost a drug culture language behind kind of this idea of being drunken or high on the Spirit of God. And they had a very Calvinist movement. So it was an odd, very American combination of kind of what's new, what's exciting, what's my individual experience of this God, and yet this God seemed to be in this total control position of a sort of Calvinist view of God. So it's